Hello, I'm Glenda Shawley from Fabulous Networking, and in this video I wanted to talk about thinking. How often do you think? I suspect you would tell me that you think all the time. It's a routine daily activity. But how often do you stop and think about thinking? I suspect that's something you do much less frequently, but I think it's something that we really need to do quite regularly. I love this quote from Henry Ford: thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. Yeah, I think we can all be guilty of superficial thinking in regular patterns, sort of shooting from the hip in a way, and not necessarily thinking as deeply as we need to come up with really great solutions, offers, creative thinking. So I want to share a few thoughts on that today, and hopefully some helpful hints on what you might do to put a little bit more effort into thinking on a more regular basis. So I think the first thing we have to think about is, why are we thinking? Well, it may well be that it's for problem solving. We rarely solve problems without putting a deal of thought into it, and actually devoting time and some structured thinking process, maybe using some problem solving tools, will really help us to come up with a creative and effective solution to our particular problems. Equally, it might be that we've got a decision to make and we really need to devote some time and space and some skill to making those decisions, or that decision, in a way that is going to work for us and for whoever else is involved in that. I think there are other times when we're looking to progress our careers, progress in our businesses, develop ourselves or our business, when we really need to be thinking, and that might be learning as well, thinking about how we apply that learning. It might be thinking about the direction we want to go in. And I believe that there is a competitive advantage to be had by those people who really think well, who put some time and effort into coming up with distinctive solutions, distinctive ideas, creative options that can make us stand out from the crowd. Very often our competitors will see the same opportunities, the same problems, but if they don't put quite as much thinking or quite as much innovation into that thinking, they may not come up with a solution that is as good as one we can come up with when we really do devote some creative and some proper thinking tools to it. I also think that those people who think well can differentiate themselves and their businesses from their competitors and from other people in the minds of their customers, clients, advocates, anybody who's recommending them. There are various people that I immediately think of as being people who really think deeply, who question things all the time, who've always got some innovative ideas, and who I would go to if I wanted some creative input or some questioning on my own thought processes. And I think that can be really helpful. So I think it's really important that we create the climate for thinking. And I believe that that comes about breaking our patterns. While we're going about our routine work and our daily activities, then the chances are we're always going to think in the same way. We're going to be not so innovative as we might need to be. We might not be challenging in the way that we need to be. So in order to break the patterns, I think we have to create the time and space to think. Now, it might just be blocking out a few minutes or hours or a day or two, depending on how big the issue is we want to think about, in our diaries, and actually downing tools and just giving the thought processes that time and space to think. I also believe that it's really important that we get out of our routine, regular space. Yes, we can think there, but it doesn't bring a lot of fresh thought. And it also can be distracting, because when we've got our regular things around us, we so often are overwhelmed with all the other things we've got to do, and we're perhaps inclined to rush the thinking or not give it our full attention. So a change of location can really help. And this photo is of Deal in Kent, which is a place that I went to for a couple of days a few years ago, when I really wanted to be able to think about the book I was about to write. I'd done a bit of research. I wanted to be able to analyze that research. I wanted to see where it was leading me in terms of what my book needed to be. And I wanted to get away from the humdrum and all the other things that are on my to-do list, so I could really put some quality time into thinking. That open space, that sea, I was very lucky with the weather, but just having that freshness and a fresh perspective really made the thinking process so much easier. And that's what gone backwards. What I really wanted to think about next was having a thinking process. I put together one here. It may be that you need all the steps. It may be that for some things you don't need all the steps. I think we need to start with the first one. What am I trying to achieve? And I don't think we should get too specific about that. I think we want something that's broad and open-ended, that isn't going to put us in a straitjacket for our thinking, but actually knowing what it is we're trying to do with these thought processes is really quite helpful. And it could be that I want to come up with a new product or service for a client. I want to come up with a new marketing campaign. I want to find a way of saving costs, but something quite broad brush, but that allows us then to think, right, now, how do I go about coming up with those ideas? And your next step might be gathering information, collecting the data, the facts, and some of that will be internal to you, and some of it might be looking outside, looking at what else is going on in the world, what other information is around there, what changes in legislation, etc., are there, what are other people, what are our competitors doing? Gathering that information that's going to help you consider the angles that you need to do in order to take your thinking where it needs to go. And your next step in that case would be to evaluate that information. What is it telling you? And how are you going to use that going forward? It may be that if you're just looking for creative ideas, you don't need to go through those two stages. You start with what I'm trying to achieve, and then you go into the generation of ideas, and there are loads of tools that would allow us to do that. So I'll share a couple of thoughts on that in a moment. And then quite probably you will want to test those ideas out before making a final conclusion, or not. It may be you just go with the ideas and see where they take you. So today I'm just going to think about 3 types of thinking. There are lots of different angles that we can think about, but I think that the analytical, critical and creative process is what we all need to be able to do to apply to our businesses, and whether that be problem solving, decision making, or coming up with creative ideas, we will need one or all 3 of those areas. So what do we mean? Analytical is, what do we know? And then analysing what that is telling us about what do we know? And then the critical thinking is applying that. What does it mean? Evaluating that information. How can we use it? And then the creative will be the what alternatives are there, and coming up with some different solutions. If you have ever put much thought into thinking, you will be familiar with Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. And I believe that these are tools that we need to use for many aspects of thinking. Even if we're doing the thinking on our own and we're wearing all of the hats, it's like juggling the hats. What's the process that we're going to use for this thought? What are we trying to achieve? Do we need to go through the analytical, the critical and the creative? How are we going to gather that information, etc.? planning our thought processes. And that could be particularly helpful if it's going to be happening over a period of time, or if it's going to involve a number of people. And it's worth remembering that this isn't a once and done activity. Sometimes we have to put the blue hat back on and say, have we gone off tangent at a tangent? Is there, do we need to go back to that process and planning, and not allow ourselves to be too sidetracked? The white hat is gathering the facts and the information, which is so crucial for so many thought processes that we need to go through, particularly in the decision making and problem solving arena. And then the other 4 hats are really about the perspective that we take on the thinking that we're doing. Some of us will naturally lean towards the yellow hat, and we'll be looking at all the benefits and all the positives of the thought processes we are going through. Others are much more likely to be wearing the black hat. In our house, I've got the yellow hat, husband's got the black hat, and we need to make sure that they're in balance. It's all too easy to let one dominate, and then we don't end up with a really balanced thought process. So the black hat is looking at all the risks, all the downsides, the cautions, and what things could go wrong, whereas the benefits of the yellow hat is looking at all the things that can go right. And then the creativity and ideas comes when we're wearing the green hat. And, I think all thinking needs some creativity in there. We need to think about other ways of doing things and better ways of doing things. And that's where the creativity and the ideas come in. And then the red hat is, we can wear all these hats and we can come up with some great thoughts and ideas. But if they don't feel right, we're not going to do anything about it. So actually putting the red hat on and allowing our feelings and our gut to have some influence over that thought process is a really valid thing to do. So I think it's really important that when we're doing some thinking, that we typically wear the 6 thinking hats for at least a part of the process, even if it's only the final evaluation where we actually look at the decision we've come up with. So what's in your toolbox? There are loads and loads of decision-making tools, and I will put another video together that shares some of them. But I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. First of all, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's all too easy to see things from our own perspective all the time. But, if we actually look at the same thing from a child's perspective, we get a totally different angle. Children see the world in a much more simplistic, exciting, they're often more curious than we are. So if you wore your child's shoes, painful though that may be, you may well find yourself looking at things from a different angle and coming up with something that's different. Equally, we see people using things like animals for thought processes. So if you looked at it as an elephant might look at it, that problem that seems huge to you might look very tiny. On the other hand, if you looked at it from the angle of the fly, it might look huge. So actually using a different lens to look at the problem or look at the thing we're thinking about can be really helpful. And we often talk about thinking outside the box. I do believe that we should allow our thinking to be unconstrained. So you may well have come across the 9-dot puzzle where you're to join the 9 dots by 4 straight lines without taking your pen off the paper. Now, clearly, I've done this on a computer and I couldn't do that without everything going everywhere in the software I was using. But this is what it should look like. And you have to go outside of the box to join them. So it's an illustrative point about, actually you sometimes physically need to take yourself out of the space to be able to think more with more diversity and more different angles, and how can you do that? And sometimes that might require some other tools that will enable the creative thinking. And then I think sometimes we just need to challenge ourselves and get curious. So do you know how peanuts grow? I didn't. And do you know how cashews grow? And do you think the two are the same? I'll tell you they're not, but I'm not going to tell you how they grow. I'll leave you to find out if you don't already know. So there are lots of tools that we can use, and I can share those at some point, but I just want to summarize my thinking on this for this video. And that is, make some time and space for thinking. Okay, if it's something routine, something quite simple, it's something you can probably do when you go and make a cup of tea, or go and walk around the garden for a few minutes, or go and have a shower and give it some creative space there. But if it's actually something bigger and something that is going to have more impact, block out some more time, think about what you want to achieve, think about the process that you're going to use, and then investigate the tools that can help you. And are those analytical tools? Are they analysis tools? Are they evaluation tools? Or do you need something that's going to help you with your creative thinking? And then think about how you're going to challenge your ideas. So, it might be that you use the 6 thinking hats. It might be that you ask somebody else to to join in the process and to challenge you, and ask them to play devil's advocate even. But I think it's really important that we do challenge those ideas and we don't necessarily accept our first thought. So I do realise that I have used thinking and thought a lot in this video, but what I hope I've done is got you to start thinking about thinking. Good luck, and I'd love to hear how you get on. Hello, I'm Glenda Shawley from Fabulous Networking, and in this